Have you ever heard a couple of lawyers talking and just thought to yourself, what on earth are they talking about? It can feel like they're speaking a completely different language. Well, it turns out, in a way, they are. Today, we're going to get right into that. The huge difference between how a lawyer thinks and how most of us think.
So, let's start with what seems like a simple question. When there's a disagreement, what's the right answer? I mean, it's human nature to look for it, right? We want the fair outcome. But what if I told you that one person's right answer could be completely, totally irrelevant to someone else's?
Okay, let's make this real. Forget abstract ideas for a minute. Picture this. You buy a concert ticket for a friend. They swear they'll pay you back. You give them the ticket, you both go, it's great, and then nothing. You never see the money. So what now? Do they have to pay you back? Now, for most of us, our reaction to that story is pretty instant. It's a gut feeling, right? It's all about what's fair, what's the right thing to do. This is what we'd call the common sense or the layperson's way of looking at it. Your brain probably starts running through all the details, you know? You're thinking about the promise they made, the whole backstory. Maybe you've been friends forever, maybe they just lost their job. You're trying to figure out if they meant it when they promised. It all boils down to a simple question of right versus wrong. It's personal. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? For the average person, this isn't a legal puzzle. It's about character, about integrity. A promise is a promise. And that idea carries a ton of moral weight no matter what the technicalities might be. Okay, now let's just hit pause on that whole way of thinking. Let's take that exact same problem and look at it through a completely different lens. A lawyer sees the same set of facts, but they come at it with a totally different set of tools. And it's not because they're cold or unfeeling. It's because they've been trained in a very specific, structured way of thinking. Here's a good way to think about it. A messy human conflict is like a radio signal that's just full of static and noise. A lawyer's job is to use their training to tune that dial, filtering out all the emotional noise and the backstory to find the one clean, clear legal signal hidden underneath it all. The very first tool they grab from that toolkit is something called issue spotting, and it's a huge deal in law school. They're trained not to ask, is this unfair? Instead, they ask, what is the specific legal question here? Because, and this is key, the emotional problem and the legal problem are often two very, very different things. And once they've spotted that legal issue, they plug it into this simple four-step framework. It's almost like a formula. First, what's the issue? Second, what's the rule? Is there a law about contracts that fits? Third, you apply that rule to the very specific facts of the case. And fourth, you reach a logical conclusion. It's a system designed to be objective and repeatable every single time. So all that theory is one thing, but how does this toolkit actually work? Let's rewind. We're going back to our friend and that concert ticket. But this time, we're going to put on our lawyer hat and analyze it. And wow, when you put these two ways of thinking side by side, the difference is just night and day. Where a layperson sees a broken promise, a lawyer asks, was there a legally valid contract? Where we focus on fairness, they focus on the specific elements of a legal rule and the provable facts. It's a massive shift from story to structure. So a lawyer looks at that whole situation and starts stripping things away. The fact that you've been friends for 10 years, the reason why they didn't pay you back, to the law, that's pretty much just static. What matters are the facts you can prove. An agreement was made, you held up your end, they took the ticket, and they didn't pay. And the big one, is there any proof, like a text message saying, I'll pay you back? There's this great quote that just nails this idea. The law has to be stable, meaning it relies on these solid, established rules so things are predictable. But it cannot stand still, because you have to apply those old rules to the constantly changing, messy facts of real life. The whole system is built on this balance. And this brings us to what can be a kind of frustrating point for us non-lawyers. The legal answer might not feel very satisfying. Maybe your friend is legally required to pay. Or maybe not, if you can't prove a valid contract existed. The outcome isn't really about what's fair in a moral sense. It's about what the system of rules says when you apply it to the provable fact. Okay, so who cares, right? They're just two different ways of looking at a problem. Well, it actually matters a lot because out in the real world, these two mindsets are bumping up against each other constantly, and sometimes they clash big time. You see it everywhere once you look for it. Think about being on a jury. You're literally told to set aside your personal feelings and just apply the law. Or when you read a news headline about some controversial court verdict and you think, that's insane, how did that happen?
Often, it's because our sense of fairness is clashing with a strict legal rule. Understanding this divide really helps you decode what's going on. So, at the end of the day, this isn't about one way of thinking being right and the other being wrong. They just have different goals. The layperson's mind is searching for a resolution that feels emotionally and morally just, one that fits the human story. The lawyer's mind is searching for a conclusion that's consistent, predictable, and based on the established system. Both are just trying to find an answer. And that brings us to one last really important question. We've spent all this time breaking down the lawyer's analytical toolkit, but it's not the only way to solve a problem. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. When is our intuitive, common sense, gut-level way of thinking not just an alternative, but actually more valuable than a purely legal approach? Something to think about.